Hey guys, in this video we'll talk about the top 5 allied units for your Space Marines list and in what situations exactly would you want to add these to your roster. So without further ado, let's dive right in. First unit I really want you to know about is the Sisters Emulator, and that's right, it sounds a bit weird to have Sisters units in your Space Marines list, but hear me out. Very powerful vehicle which I think Sisters should use more often than they do even now. And our list can actually benefit from this one as well. It costs only 115 points, and I know 115 points is not nothing, but it's much cheaper than most of our vehicles that we as Space Marines have. And yes, of course, we're paying here for not having access to Oath of Moment, but to be honest, as you'll see a little bit later, you don't necessarily need Oath of Moment for it to be efficient. The reason why you would want it in the first place in your roster is actually very simple. It allows you to ignore cover on an enemy unit that it targets with any of its weapons, and in addition to the multi-melters, which you're always going to take, you also have a heavy bolter on this one, so you can, if you want to, ignore cover on one thing, just shooting 3 shots of the heavy bolter into it and send your hunter killer missile and the multi-melters into another target. I think I don't need to explain to you why it's so important to be able to ignore cover, because blocking it is essentially like having extra AP on all of your guns for your army, because almost everything nowadays can have and will have cover during the game, so we'll have an extra +1 to their save. This is especially important if you find yourself often fighting against lists with very high save units like dreadnoughts and tanks, 2+ save in particular, and you don't feel like you have enough AP in your roster. And to be honest, Space Marines don't have a lot of stuff that has AP4. They do have options like Lancer, Plasma on the Redemptor, etc., but it's far from being abundant in the Codex. Making everything that is AP2, AP3 and everything that is AP3, AP4 is going to make a huge difference to how often your opponent is going to roll that pesky save against your high damage gun. The very observant of you might have thought already, wait VF, why are you suggesting using this when we have our own Stormspeeder Hammerstrike in the Codex, which is fully integrated into the Space Marines ecosystem, so to speak, so it can use Oath of Moment, etc. And it also flies, it has 2 inches more movement, and here are a couple of the reasons why. First, it costs 10 points less, the Emulator, which can be a big difference in case when you don't have anywhere to pull those 10 points from. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, and this can be a decisive factor. Next one, and this one is big, Emulator is much more durable. It might not seem like it, but to be honest, toughness 10 versus the toughness 9 on the Stormspeeder is going to make a big difference, and also the 6+ invulnerable save will help you more often than you think. Plus, the Emulator has a small keyword where Stormspeeder doesn't. However, some of you might think, wait, the Stormspeeder has like 5 damage d6 or something shots, and the Emulator only has 4. And well, if you don't count the Hunter and Killer, of course, which I'm not going to count here. And to be honest, I also thought that, so I ran a calculation for us, and here's the result. Essentially, Emulator beats the Stormspeeder in all cases when you're targeting a toughness 10 2+ save tank, which is a standard thing that I usually run these tests against, because the 2+ save tank essentially means either a 3+ save tank in cover or a 2+ save tank out in the open, which both can happen in the game. The Emulator will do 4.3 wounds to said tank versus the 4 wounds that the Stormspeeder is going to do with Oath of Moment. Without Oath of Moment, the Stormspeeder only does 3 wounds. So it's funny, but the Emulator actually does a better job at both ignoring cover, because it will survive longer, and actually shooting whatever target you are looking to shoot at. Stormspeeder has an advantage that it moves 2 inches faster, and also has fly, which fly will not help you in most situations, unfortunately, nowadays, but the +2 inch movement is nice, as are the extra benefits that you might or might not get from your detachment rule, depending on what detachment you're running. So the Stormspeeder Hammerstrike versus the Emulator is not a cut and dry, like Emulator is definitely better or the Stormspeeder is definitely better. It's a subjective thing, and I just want you to know that there is an option like this, especially for those of you who either have access to or actually own the Space Sisters of Battle models, and you have access to an Emulator take a look at that because it can be a very powerful addition to your list, especially if you don't have the Stormspeeder yet and already have an Emulator. As always, I want to remind you about my Patreon 40K coaching service. If you're looking for help building your competitive rosters, preparing you for tournaments, or have any questions about your collection in general, check out the links for my Patreon in the description. Thank you. Next is the funniest assassin out of them all, the Eversor. I love the fact that he has received a substantial upgrade when the Assassin's Codex has dropped, getting a big buff from being just an okay low knob to something that is a serious melee blender. He's just absolutely packed with rules. He has Scout 9, he has low knob obviously, advance plus shoot and charge all the time. He can even explode for D3 mortal wounds because for some reason he has the deadly demise. Well, we know for what reason. He is like pumped up with toxins and steroids and everything so much that he just violently combusts if he ends up in a situation from which he cannot come out alive. If I remember my lore correctly, it's like a specially crafted feature they have to make sure that they do absolute maximum damage in case they cannot survive. He's move 9, so combined with this 9-inch scout and the advanced charge, he's very fast, much faster than any other single infantry character you can have, unless like you run maybe a jump back captain with a Thunderhammer or something like that. But even still, like a 12-inch moving captain needs some way to access the advance and charge, which is not every detachment, and it's not going to be inbuilt definitely because it doesn't have it. And also he doesn't have a Scout 9, so he will be starting from the deployment zone, where this guy is going to be starting 9 inches away from your deployment zone, or 9 inches closer to your opponent's one. Other than that, there is just no competition for this small, like 32 mil / 40 mil in case of captain base that can move so quickly and do some really nasty damage. Talking about that, he has 6 attacks at strength 5, AP 2, damage 2 with sustained hits 3, anti-infantry 3+, which does really help with its sort of low-ish strength 5, and precision because obviously. Also has once per game auto advance 6 inches, adding 3 to his attacks profile, so he will be hitting with 9 attacks and you'll be looking for those 6s because sustained hits 3 is gonna massively pump up his damage output, which is one thing that I don't like about him just a bit, is that his damage is very swingy. So you can roll like 2 or 3 6s and just do an absolute ton of damage, or you can not roll any and you don't have any rerolls on him and you'll do moderate damage. But in any case, he does present a real threat to any character whatsoever, or to infantry squads with 2 wounds each, which are also quite a popular sort of type of a unit. Otherwise, he has a pretty standard, and don't get me wrong, a good profile for an assassin, which is 4 wounds, toughness 4, and 4+ invulnerable save. It's nothing to really write home about, but it's enough so that your opponent has to put some effort into killing him. He's not gonna die from just, I don't know, a random bolt gun. Some characters are much fragile than these guys. He costs 120 points, which is not cheap, and that's like the biggest thing that keeps him out of many lists, I think, is that you probably, you need to engineer your list in such a way that you need this guy and you actually have the space for him as well. Whereas, for example, Combi Open Lieutenant, which costs 70 points, you can very often find the real estate to put him into your roster. Keep in mind that nothing, and I mean nothing, in the Space Marine Codex, or to be honest in all the non-compliant codexes as well, does anything quite like the Eversor. Because Mephiston, for example, he's also an awesome melee low knob, but he's not Eversor. And to be honest, I don't, off the top of my head, don't have any examples of any other low knob guys that are anything like this. He's really great as a tactical nuke for sort of this mid-game point where you send him to absolutely sow chaos deep in your enemy lines. And before that, you need to be very careful with him because obviously he's at a lot of points and you don't want like a random grenade killing him outright. So you want to keep him hidden so that his 9-inch move plus the advance 6 inches or D6 actually brings him to somewhere where your opponent doesn't want him to be, but still relatively safe. So staging him is going to be very important. Next is the Navigator, and this one is a very specific niche use, but I still wanted you to know about this one because I feel like a lot of lists have that problem and don't have a good solution for it. It's a 75 points character with just 3 wounds and a 4+ invulnerable save, so nothing spectacular in the durability department, and to be honest, he doesn't need to be durable. It would be nice if he was, but it's not necessary for this type of a character. Why you would want to have him is to protect your home objective from enemy deep strikes, because this guy has a 12-inch like classic no-go zone like the infiltrators around him. Of course, it's not exactly like the infiltrators, because infiltrators are 5 models, so they can really spread out that zone a lot. He's just a 132 mil, but still enough to make him and the objective unchargeable. I feel like a lot of people nowadays, they suffer from the problem of deep strikers coming in and stealing their home objective, but they don't have the points to buy the full 100-point squad of infiltrators. And I think in a lot of cases, not like too many, but there are cases where you would actually want something on that home objective that can block those deep strikers, and there is just nothing else like the Navigator that can do it. It is niche, of course, because you can always just buy a 5-man scout squad for this price and even 5 points cheaper and get a pretty good coverage from like the standard deep strike. However, this will still be chargeable, and the problem is that nowadays there are a lot of those 6-inch deep strike rules. Grey Knights have that, and a lot of other armies have it, and I'm pretty sure that as we go like closer to the end of 10th edition, there's going to be more of these 6 inches or some other type of a closer deep strike rules popping up everywhere, and the Navigator and the Infiltrators are going to be the one real protection from it, because they override all the other like special deep strike closer rules, unlike normal units, which can be spread out as much as possible, but unless you're covering your whole deployment zone with a 6-inch no deep strike blanket, which is really hard to do, you're gonna be usually charged or at least like shot by that unit that deep strikes. Plus, he has a pretty neat mortal wounds ability, so he can do 3 mortal wounds to a unit within 12 that fails a battle shock test, and for infantry units that's at -2 to leadership, which can be useful for like the end game situation where you can step out with these guys, with this guy from like the side of a ruin and snipe out maybe last few wounds of a character. It's not going to happen often, but it's a useful thing to have in your back pocket. Actually, a small bonus to this one, because I really wanted to add this to the video, but I did not add it to the slide, is that another guy that is also a niche case, but I really want you to know about him, is the Ministorm Priest. He's a different character. He costs 40 points, and his essentially big thing is that he costs 40 points. So you have 3 wounds of toughness 3 with a 4+ invulnerable save that can stand on the home objective and just be there. So Space Marines don't have a lot of stuff that is 40 points, and if you're not into like buying an Ancient, which I think the cheapest Ancient is still like 10 or 15 points more expensive than this is one of the cheapest things you can add to just give yourself another scoring choice. It probably will not be your home objective scoring unit, but it can be your like thing that you put in reserves to go and do an action somewhere. Next are the Imperial Agents. So this is again a very simple use case, and you need this unit for scoring, nothing else, just simple scoring unit. And why you would want to have these guys, in what situation I should say would you want to have these guys, is when you don't have 70 points for Scout Squad, you don't want an Invader ATV because you want an actual infantry unit to spread out for screening purposes and also like have more RC. You don't want, for the same reason, a Tech Marine or an Ancient, which are cheaper than the Imperial Agents, but they're still just one base, so they don't have enough coverage for your like deep strike denial purposes, and also they don't give you enough OC in case someone decides to go and contest this objective with you. For these situations, this unit is pretty good as it has an assortment of guns. It even has like a servitor with a multi-melter, so you can sometimes do damage to something that is tougher than an infantry guy. Like a sprinkle of melee weapons, nothing to write home about. Don't even think about this as something really powerful or that can stand up for itself. No, it's a mostly unit for scoring and nothing else. But it is 10 points cheaper than Scouts, and you don't have anything that is as cheap as this unit and has as many models, because it has 6 models in the unit, so you can have quite a lot of that area coverage, and also you get 6 OC from them. So nothing in the Space Marine Codex does exactly this, and that's why this unit has some intrinsic value. If scouts were still 55 points like they were when they were released, which was crazy, we would not be having this conversation. There will be just no reason to run the Imperial Agents because they're just way worse in every other aspect than scouts. And of course, if you have extra 10 points, invest those points into scouts. Don't buy the Imperial Agents. But if you need another scoring unit, if you want, even not for your home objective, maybe for like just something to do actions or to send in the reserves, to stand on an objective not in your deployment zone but the natural expansion one, they can be a good option. And last but definitely not least is the undisputed 10th edition queen of the allied units. This list would certainly be incomplete without her, Kellus Assassin, that costs 100 points now. She has seen some changes from the start of 10th edition. Specifically, she lost her ability to influence an enemy stratagem to make it more expensive for the opponent until the end of the game. Instead, now it's an aura of 12 inches of +1 to the CP cost for your opponent, which is still good, but it takes a bit more care to set up because you usually wanted the Callidus to jump around at the edges of the board. And now sometimes you might want to consider sending her to like closer to the central objective, and still probably hopefully hidden from enemy guns. But then this way you can sometimes get those that mileage from her ability. I thought when the ability came out, when they changed it, I thought that it's never going to be useful. But to be honest, if you keep it in mind, there will be cases, especially towards the end of the game, where your opponent really wants to reroll that charge roll. For example, when they're charging Callidus herself, and they just cannot because +1 to the cost. Her actual big thing is teleportation. At the end of every turn, she can come off the board, and next movement phase, she can pop up elsewhere. And this is better, much better than the scouts, because the scouts do it from strategic reserve, so they have to come from the edge of the board. She does use the normal deep strike, so she can pop up anywhere. Obviously, she's just a 132 mil base, not 528 mil bases, so she can. It's much easier to fit her into like a corner of the enemy deployment zone, which they forgot to cover with their units. Also has a nifty move d6 inches at the end of the fight phase if she was an engagement range ability, which is the way that you can actually go outside of 3 inches for the teleportation to work, even in case that she was fighting someone. So if your opponent charges her, she survives, there is a very good chance that you roll that 3 and are outside of the engagement range, so you can use her ability at the end of your opponent's turn to come off the board and be in deep strike. There's a pretty cool neural shredder pistol with anti-infantry 2+ precision and torrent, so in case that a character with like 1 wound remaining is charging her, you can actually try to snipe the last wound out, because strength 5 AP 2 damage 1 is nothing to scoff at, especially with anti-infantry 2+. It's not ignoring cover though, but AP 2 is not bad still. She has a really strong combat profile with 5 attacks at strength 5, AP 4, and damage 2. So not often that we see AP 4 actually on any characters, to be honest, with lethal hits and precision. He also has infiltrators, which is very useful to pre-position her somewhere like in the middle of the board early in the game to score some points for you, and then take her off the board when the opponent closes in. Fights first in case that you mess up with her positioning early in the game and someone actually charges her, she will get to strike first with her 5 attacks, which can actually do some significant damage to the units that have charged her, especially if it's something like, I don't know, a Sterngat veteran squad, which models are relatively expensive. They don't have invulnerable save, so her AP is going to work perfectly, and they are 2 wounds each. So something like this, charging your Callidus, you really like this because you're at least going to get some of your investment back. You obviously don't want to keep her away and safe if you can, but if you couldn't, at least she's going to have this insurance. This teleportation ability is essentially why you want her on the list. If you want to be able to send a unit around the board and not be constrained to just the edge of the battlefield, say you have those extra points from the scouts, you can upgrade the scouts to Callidus. This can be a really nice idea. She can do things that the scouts obviously cannot, such as deploying in your opponent's deployment zone, potentially even threatening the opponent's home objective scoring unit if it does not really have a lot of melee or shooting output. She can just stay there, hold on, especially if like the unit doesn't shoot well. She can force the opponent to either charge her or just stay there and be charged by her in the next turn. So that is something that scouts don't really do that well, and they probably would not even be there in the first place because of the limitations of strategic reserves. Despite a lot of players actually forgetting about the Callidus and thinking that her age is over, I think that she's more than relevant still. Let me know if I've missed an allied unit that is better than any of these ones. I would really love to hear your opinion, because there are quite a lot of units that we have access to, so I very well might have forgotten. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.